In this video, I'm going to walk you through installing your ATN X-Sight 4K Pro on your rifle. We'll be utilizing Burris XGR rings for this. ATN does provide a set of three 30mm extra high rings with the sight. The reason I'm going with the Burris is twofold. One, the extra high rings were just too much for this bolt action rifle. I had over 1.5 inches, almost 2 inches of space between the barrel and the bottom of my sight. What that does is it changes your cheek well on the rest and causes you to have to lift your head up to see through the sight. I'm one of those shooters. I like my sight as low to the barrel as I can get it, especially when using a flat stock like this. The other reason is go back and watch my review of those ATN rings, the provided rings, and you'll see some flaws that I found in them. They do work, and if that's what you have to work with, I mean, go ahead and definitely use them. This video will work for those as well. Do note that the torque specs for those rings are much, much lower than, say, these Burris. I don't actually know the numbers. They're not published on ATN's website or in these user manuals, but I would stick with about 30 inch-pounds when you're attaching the ring to the rail, and no more than about 13 inch-pounds when attaching the top to the bottom half of the ring. For the Burris, we'll give you those specs as we go through it. Few things about the X-Sight 4K Pro. ATN did a great job with the eye relief on this sight. It has about 3 to 3.5 inches of eye relief, which is way better than most digital sights out there. Definitely better than the X-Sight 2 and the original X-Sight, which gave you about 1.5 inches. So it really does make mounting options are a lot more, and it's also a little simpler. The other big thing ATN did was the sight change. They changed the housing. A lot of you may have had issues with the bolt clearing the sight if you had the scope or the sight low on your rifle. ATN's fixed that. There's no bolt issues. The one thing I want to comment about is the housing on the X-Sight 4Ks. This section right here is about 3 3/4 inches. If you have a 4-inch base, you're not going to have enough space to get that mounted. That's when you have to actually turn around and use these cantilever mounts that ATN does provide. This is an EGW rail, and I just barely have enough space to get this sight mounted on it and still have comfortable eye relief. I did go, again, with the medium rings, and I will show you here in just a bit. It gives me a nice, about 1/2 inch, maybe a little over clearance from my barrel. Let's go ahead and get started. Always want to make sure our rifle is safe, action's open, no magazine. Some things I've done here in advance for the video is I've gone ahead and leveled my rifle using a dual bubble level system. What that is I have this level here. I place it on the rail. I verify the rifle's level. I place this level on the barrel and then make minor adjustments until the bubbles line up. Now I've already done that, so I don't need to make adjustments here. Why do I do this, you ask? When I am shooting at a distance greater than I sighted in, the crosshairs, or even shorter than I sighted in, those crosshairs may have to move up or down, especially if I'm using the ballistics calculator, or if I'm using traditional glass and I'm adjusting my turret for MOA. As I move up and down, I need it to be perfectly level so that it moves up and down. If it's at an angle, it will move up and down and left or right, depending on the pitch. So really important that you get that sight mounted level. ATN does provide a digital level inside the sight, and I have compared both this 3x14 and 5x20 to my little Wheeler bubble level here, and they're spot on. So you can use that. For the sake of the video, obviously I'm going to use the bubble level, make it a little easier. Now, first thing, or a couple other things actually. One, I highly recommend you have a torque wrench. These nuts and these screws are finicky and it's easy to over tighten or strip them out. If you follow the manufacturer's recommended specs and use a torque wrench, you're going to be better off. You can pick these up for, I think, $30 or so as well. They come with a little kit that has 90% of the right size tips, from Torx to Allen keys to this 1/2 inch socket. Also, a little Loctite I will not be using this for this video just because I will move this sight around to different guns over the next several weeks as I test it out. Blue Loctite, the medium, is perfect. That just keeps your rings, the Allen screws from the rings or the Torx screws from the rings from slipping at all. The mount between your rifle and your sight is integral to performance. So you don't want to cut corners when doing this. Do it once, do it right, don't worry about it, right? So next step, or first step we're going to do, we've leveled our rifle. I've already gone ahead and played with these rings on this rail to figure out where I want it for sight comfort. What you don't want to do is get this thing all the way installed and then turn around and find out the sight is too far forward or too far back. So what you do is you just finger tighten these rings up, mount the scope, put some screws in it, don't move it around with just the scope sitting on the rings. It would be a disaster if it fell off. And just slide it back and forth. If you need to pick the whole unit up and move it, you can. Get comfortable before you start. First thing we're going to do is we're going to mount our base or our ring to our base. And when you do that, you see there's some play in here. I always want to slide this ring all the way forward till it locks kind of into place. The bottom of the ring has a recoil lug. This recoil lug needs to touch the front of my base. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm just going to finger tighten it. I'm going to do the same thing for the back ring here. Sliding it all the way forward and finger tightening it. I will say too, if you find that your base is too short, there are several manufacturers out there that make extra long bases. I buy a lot of mine through EGW. They make a lot of gun parts, very reasonably priced. I've not had one fail yet or had an issue with a single one of them. So for the money, it's pretty good bang for the buck. Once I've got my rings attached, they're not torqued down yet. I'm going to follow the manufacturer's recommendations or specs. For these Burris XTRs, they recommend 65 inch-pounds. I've got my wrench already set. You'll hear a click, and that lets me know I've reached 65 inch-pounds. There we go. Our rings are attached to the rifle. Next, we're going to go ahead and place the sight on the rings. Make sure that there is no obstruction, right? I want to make sure my bolt functions. I want to make sure I can get to my safety. I can adjust the eyepiece. I can adjust the focus. The only place that should be touching is the rings to the actual sight. So just double check that before you go too much further. Would hate for you to mount your sight, tighten it down, and find you're crushing a piece of metal or you have some inoperable feature because it's blocked. So once you've got your sight on, we'll go ahead and start the process of putting these top rings on. Now Burris, these are thick rings, and so there are 6 Torx screws on each one of these rings. I'm going to go ahead and tell you what we're going to do and then fast forward through so you don't have to spend 10 minutes watching me tighten these down. I alternate kind of just back and forth like lacing a shoe. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then go back the other way and bring these rings down as even as possible. And that really matters towards the end when you start tightening this up. We will level this once it's snug, but as I tighten, if I over tighten one side, it can actually cause the sight to just slightly twist in the ring, and then we're back to our crosshairs kind of being at that angle. So again, slowly tighten it down. Once you get close, then you'll want to make sure you're using your torque wrench. And so I'm going to go ahead and actually use the star drive and just start tightening just with my fingers because I can turn it so much faster. Okay, now that we have our scope loose in the rings, but the rings, they're tightened down a little bit here, we're going to go ahead and make sure we're level. Again, there's 2 ways to do this. If you have a bubble level on the front, it obviously makes it a little more precise, but you can also use a rest and use the internal level if you need to. I'm going to go ahead and use the external level for the sake of the video. So we've got the gun perfectly level. I'm going to turn the sight just a little bit. And a little more. This can take just a second sometimes because it's hard to get just the smallest turn in there. I think we've got it about perfect right there. Once we've got it level, we want to tighten these up, but we want to tighten just a little at a time on each side, again, so we don't cause the scope to rotate. Again, follow the manufacturer's specs on torque setting. For these Burris XTRs, I know that I need to set them to 20 inch-pounds. So I'm going to go ahead and set my wrench. And then I'm going to tighten these up one at a time. And I'm just going to go kind of that back and forth zigzag pattern like I'm lacing a shoe until I get snug. Opposite side. Oh, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on the front ring. Same thing on the back ring. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We're mounted. So that's really all there is to it. I'm going to check level one more time. Make sure I didn't mess it up. And we are perfect. So really that's all there is to mounting your 4K Pro to a rifle. If you have any questions, comments, or thoughts, please leave them below. Also, any additional videos you'd like to see, leave me a comment and I'll do my best to make those.